Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2025 Latinx Kidlit Book Festival. And we're going to go ahead and get my slides up and we're going to begin our session together. Okay, so welcome. My name's Tiana, and I'm currently calling in from the public library I grew up in. I spent a lot of time here throughout the school year and the summer. I'm in Arizona, coming to you here, visiting family, friends, and doing the much necessary recharging before my school year starts and I head back to New York, which I'm currently teaching sixth grade at Eastside Community. And it's an honor and a privilege to be with you today. And today in our session, we're going to be talking about nurturing the love for reading and the heart of the writer. And all of the work is anchored in the amazing and brilliant work of so many Latinx authors and artists. Next slide. So I know the thank yous usually come at the end, but I'm going to thank all the teachers at the beginning and educators. Teaching is a fulfilling profession, and it requires a lot of physical energy and social emotional energy. And sometimes teaching feels really, really hard. And I want to just thank everyone before we get started. And if you're a first-year teacher or an early career teacher, welcome to the profession. If you're a teacher that has been in the profession for some time, thank you for all of the time and dedication. And for teachers that might be in their last year or are retiring, congratulations. And again, thank you for your leadership as you help pave the way to center children throughout time. Okay. So today we're going to go on a little journey, and this journey is more like a window into my sixth grade classroom. Everything we talk about today is something that I can do, and it's an invitation in for fellow classroom teachers to try out in their classrooms. So as we're on this journey, it's always important to start with reflections. And I think it's really, really important to be reflective in our practice. And I'm always constantly stopping and pausing and thinking, like, how did that go? What could I do better? What can I keep? What needs to go? That just helps us grow. So as we think about reading and writing and nurturing the love for reading and the heart of the writer, like, let's think about who we are as people too. Is what do you love about reading? What do you love about writing? And I think it's also really important to think about those tensions that you may have felt with reading and writing. And we need to think about what we love and like those tensions, because sometimes we need to interrogate what we love and those tensions to make sure that we're showing up for kids in the best way possible and our students in the best way. So along with that, it's also incredibly, incredibly important to ask our kids and ask our students how they feel and what they're thinking. Too many times decisions are being made, and we're going to talk about this throughout this session, are being made for students without asking how they actually feel. So just some questions that you could ask your students throughout the year. It's not just the beginning of the year, but throughout the year is, what do you want from your reading and writing experience to be like? What do you want? And then what do you dream about as a reader and a writer? And that's probably my favorite question to ask my students is, what are you dreaming about for your reading and writing experiences? And kids are always growing and students are always growing. And we know this. I mean, if you're a teacher and after break and then the students come back and you're like, wow, you've changed. Kids are always growing, and we have a responsibility to grow alongside kids. Otherwise, if we can't grow and reflect, then we can't really nurture the love for reading and the heart of the writer. So with this, I think it's important to be, as we talk about the work coming into the classroom, I think it's important to be honest and real about elements in society that are influencing and making decisions for reading and writing in our classrooms. So if you have a pen or like however you jot, I'm going to ask you a few questions and just kind of put either a number or what words come to mind or a phrase, whatever, a sketch. I'm going to ask these questions. So, number one, what curriculum shifts have you experienced in your career? What policies and directives have you experienced in your career? And what have been what has been the positives and the challenges of funding in your career? And the reason why I want us to really think about those things, because from a national to the state to the city and even to the local, like within the school, there's a lot of things happening that influence and impact reading and writing. And as teachers, this is a lot of weight we have to carry and a large responsibility to make sure that we're still centering the student, because a lot of these decisions are being made outside of the classroom. And again, going back to those reflection questions, how many curriculum shifts were kids actually asked? How many kids were actually brought into a think tank for policy and directives? How many places actually create spaces for kids to help make decisions about allocation of funding? If all these things are happening and it's best for kids, have we even asked their opinion? Next slide. So, with that, as we are advocating in our classrooms and in our school spaces and in our communities to support readers and writers and really nurture that love and that heart, um, we are going to navigate these complexities. And it's really helpful to have the work of other educators and organizations as a companion. Because sometimes when you're advocating, you're alone and not everyone's with you yet. However, you have the companions and the support of other educators and organizations as you advocate for kids and centering reading and writing in authentic ways in your classroom. So one example is Disrupt Text. That's from Dr. Kim Parker, Trisha Barvia, Lorena Jorban, and Julia Torres. And from their mission statement, you can see how they say, we believe that literacy is liberation, and by developing students' literacy skills, we can support their ability to critically read and navigate a democratic society. And to be literate in today's world, students must develop empathy and understanding of diversity of experiences. And here we're seeing those keywords that literacy is liberation and how that kids need to be able to critically read for the society and to develop empathy. And another place to find support is NCTE's 2018 Students' Right to Read position statement. NCTE has many position statements for many different things across education that can support your advocacy work. And in their position statement, they are talking about that they say that towards the end that also the individual's right to read freely, to choose the right to freely choose what they would like to read. So we're seeing that this choice is coming up. And then also in the American Library Association, they are also talking about that the freedom to read is making it possible for readers to choose freely from a variety of offerings. And I just want us to hold that. It's about choice. It's about literacy as liberation. It's about navigating a democratic society and really thinking about what students really want and giving voice to students in authentic ways. Next slide. So with that, so the questions I kind of put up on that screen, I always ask my kids. I mean, my students are probably really tired of getting surveys from me. So I'm sorry. But it helps me like get some honest feedback and the pulse of the classroom so I can make the shifts to be better for them. So a couple of things that have happened when we're thinking about nurturing the love for reading and the love for writing are these are some quotes that just come up throughout the year. And you probably have experienced something similar. So one student said, like when they're looking for books, I mean, you probably have a couple of students who are like, "Hey, can I go to the library? Can I need to go? I need to go find a book." And meanwhile, they have a whole backpack full of books. So one student once said to me, "I've looked. So do you got a book for me?" And so when we think about nurturing the love for reading, we have to have book suggestions available all the time because kids want to read and they want the books. Another instance is probably one of my favorites is when the energy is spread across the room. And it's like you have a kid reading, and all of a sudden they're like looking to the side, and they keep looking to the side because their fellow classmates like laughing, and they want to know what they're laughing at in that book or the sounds that they're making, like the ooh, ah, kind of thing. Students have said, like, you got extra copies of their book because I need to read it. And then when we talk about writing, this is always, and this has been happening more recently in the last couple of years, is I always greet my kids at the door if I'm on time. And or as they're coming in, there's always a group of kids that's like popping up, you know, and saying, when are we free writing today? We have to finish working on our story. So kids are asking for the books. Our students are asking for free writing. And this is like the pulse that we need to listen to, and we need to think about how does that work in the classroom and what can we do to nurture that energy. Next slide. And through all the surveys and all the observations, there's been like these commonalities of interests. Kids want books that they're interested in or that are popular in the classroom. They want to connect to a book. I think about Dr. Bishop's work, Mirrors, Windows, and Sliding Glass Doors with connections and perspectives, and reading just what is possible with reading when they read a book and something has changed inside or they've learned something. So this is what students want. So as we approach the next slide, um, as we approach the next slides, this is just one way to hype up books in the classroom, just one way. There's so many brilliant things and ideas out there. This is just one way. And let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So we're gonna like talking up books. I mean, there's been a lot of literature around talking about books. And talking about books, it doesn't just necessarily mean my voice, but what kids and students are saying. And when we think about talking about books, it's like hyping them up, and our students get excited over a lot of things. There's like the latest like TikTok dance, and if you're currently teaching, I am pretty sure you probably have a student that is doing a TikTok dance in their seat because it is so popular. Also, like kids, like last year, like everything that they were like so hyped up about which bodega made the best bacon, egg, and cheese in the neighborhood. So one bodega definitely got more business. I mean, my point here is the beauty of our youth is that when they're interested in something, there is so much energy, and we really, really want to channel some of that energy into books. So when we think about talking books, is like, what's the buzz? Like, what's been released? What's the drama? And what's going on in the world? That can kind of help us like think about what books to bring out and highlight in our classrooms. And when we think about reach, think about like what could be cross curricular. and again, coming from middle school, like when I taught elementary school, like it felt a little bit more natural because my students did switch classes, but in middle school, it's not necessarily the case. Is like how could this reach history? How could it reach math, science, art, etc.? And then also the reach across generations, multiple generations, which we'll talk about on the next slide. And another thing that to think about when talking books is what can you highlight? Like perhaps like what was the author's purpose for even writing that book? The style, the storyline, the history, and the list keeps going on. And then thinking about what platforms can be used when you are hyping up books is I mean, I don't know too much about Instagram. I'm working on it. My son's a little frustrated. We're working on it. So is this something you're going to put on Instagram? Kids will love it. Like, are you using a particular video app or maybe perhaps no tech at all? But either which way, I mean, I could give you a formula. I'm not going to do that because the students in your classroom are the students in your classroom, and we have to adjust to the needs and the interests of our community. Next slide. So one of my favorite things to nurture the love for reading is talking books across generations. And I think about growing up, and I would read stories with my dad, and just thinking about like that generational connection. And also, I was thinking about what families are asking and wanting to know. So during conferences, or in my case, I have meet and greets at the beginning of the school year. Families are always asking me what books are available. Or I've gotten questions like, hey, I saw this book come home. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? And lots of times, book suggestions. And I love this. I love the community questions around books. It helps increase the energy around reading. And so like for you, I want you to think about like, what are families asking about reading? Like what questions around books? And I know that question can go either which way. And we're going to like focus on how we can continue to nurture the love of reading with that question. Books can be like BFFs and family, so we can spread that love. Once I had a student, I think she just graduated high school this year. We were sitting in the gym, and she was the student, and you probably have a couple of these students that would literally be reading all the time. And you kind of have to make sure that they're getting down the stairs okay, not running into walls. Either which way, we were sitting on the gym floor, and I asked her how she felt about reading, and she said to me that books are like companions even when no one's there. And that kind of stuck with me, because thinking about companionship of books and thinking about how books can grow with us, that started me thinking about how books and authors can be with us across generations. And these are just a few authors that write across age groups and across generations, like Meg Medina's work, Raul III, and Margarita Ingo. So these are just a few authors, and there's so many more out there that write across generations. And when we're thinking about broadening the reach of nurturing the love of reading, is thinking about how the work of authors that write across generations and write across different styles, like how can we share their work in school spaces like open school night, maybe conferences or newsletters, or whatever platform your school has, or whatever platform you have as a classroom teacher. Definitely one of my favorite things. And if we're ever in a whole class novel, I try to make sure that I have all the books available for families. So like if they have a younger sibling that wants to read the author, then there you go. Next slide. Okay, so going back to the student that was kind of looking over and seeing what was so interesting with the giggling and the laughing, One of the best ways to nurture reading is to really, really focus in on what's interesting, what is of interest to other classmates. So 2 years ago, I had two students come together for partner reading. Both of the girls did not know each other um, before they came into our ELA class, and they didn't really spend much time outside of ELA together at first. So as they were partner reading, they built like this massive stack of books. And around the classroom, with the space that I do have, which isn't a lot, you when you walk in, you might see piles of books, and there might be like a little post-it or like a table tent that says, "Do not touch. These are blank, 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 blank stacks." And in this case, this partnership, within their stack, they were reading verse books. And so Andrea Beatriz Arango's work, Evilise Explains It All, was in there. And Ida Salazar's work, The Moon Within, was in there. And as they were reading through the stack, the buzz in the room. And one of the parents contacted me, and they said, they were thankful for the partnership and the stack, because they were saying that their daughter was reading more and more and more. And again, going back to the energy around Arango's work and Salazar's work, it just spread, and that's great. And kids wanted more copies of that. And like all the writers on this slide, from Tori, Claribel, Ernesto, Pablo, like all the writers, I cannot keep the books on the shelf. And it's because kids are being able to talk about it. Kids want to read them. The energy is there. I literally have to reorder all these copies, plus so many more a year. And if you're a teacher in the classroom, you know what I'm talking about, because these books start with one home and then they shift to another. And that's a beautiful thing. Excellent. So we talked a little bit about one way to nurture the love for reading is just by talking and hyping up books, because kids want the books. And so when we think about when we're talking about books and hyping them up, like after we've done that for a little, this is where that reflective process comes in again. Thinking about how can you increase the energy around books within your classroom community? And that's a big question, right? You may have even more questions behind that, and that's okay. What I think is really important, because there's so many things we're asked to do as teachers and educators, is what is that one thing you can commit to that is manageable? What is that one thing that you can commit to? And of course, that looks different across classroom spaces. And also thinking about the student reflection is always asking kids, like, how have you grown as a reader, and what would you like to do more of during reading? Those questions are really important. Again, it's not at the beginning of the year. It's not like a one and done thing. It's an ongoing process of reflection so that we can be responsive to the students in front of us. So with that, so we've talked about talking about books, and now it's like, okay, Tiana, let's make the connection to nurturing the heart of the writer. And we're going to go ahead and do that right now. If we can change the slide. So just like we did with reading, advocating, when we're advocating for whether it's more time, space, whatever it is for our writers, it's helpful to have the companionship of fellow educators and organizations with us. And here, NCTE's 2014 beliefs about students' right to write, which is currently being revised here. Again, just like with reading, talks about censorship. When they state censorship of writing not only stifles student voice, but denies students the important opportunity to grow as writers and thinkers. And the National Coalition Against Censorship also talks about protecting the freedom which is a fundamental human right and a keystone of democracy. And also like advocating to promote freedom of thought and inquiry opposed to censorship. And what I appreciate about this stance is also thinking about when controversy occurs, that they encourage dialogue. And that's really important too. And then one of my favorite teachers, even though I've never been in her classroom, is Felicia Ros Chavez. And she wrote the Anti-Racist Writing Workshop and how to decolonize the creative classroom, and of all many insights on how to support the writer and the heart of the writer. One thing that I keep coming back to is that every student deserves the opportunity to trust their creative impulse. Every student deserves the opportunity to exercise their own authentic voice. And again, if everybody's making decisions for kids and making decisions for the classroom without being in the classroom, I mean, how are we actually centering what students really want? Next slide. So just like reading, it's these commonalities of interest, connections, perspectives, and possibility. With the interest with writing, through surveys, students have shared that they want to play around with their content. They want to write across multiple modalities with connections. They want to connect with themselves, that there's a story living inside. Also connect with their community. And with perspectives, thinking about like being in community with other writers, to get perspective from fellow writers, but also think about how to be how their perspective might support other writers. And then possibilities. And when we think about writing and reading, like how to the creative side, and to be able to dream and just to be open with it, and just what possibilities could happen with writing. What can we discover along the way? And I'm going to pause there for a second. And I want you to think about, what is writing like in your classroom right now? Okay, you can go to the next slide. Okay, so however writing is in your classroom, just hold on to that. And just like we're talking about books and nurturing the reader, we're going to talk about one way to nurture the heart of the writer. Just one way. There's so many different ways, and this is just one way. And one of these things that we've done is thinking about how free writing with fellow writers and mentors. And I'm going to shortly make that connection in the next couple of slides for us. Is again, like with reading, what's the buzz? Like, what are kids reading? What are kids consuming? What's the interest? Who are the writers in the room? And thinking about what authors and collaborations can you highlight? And the second question goes along with it. It's who, and then like the what can be highlighted for your class. And the what could be like how, like the author's process. And it's always cool to see how writers' processes change, because when kids learn that fellow writers, whether it be an author of their book or their classmates, have changed their process, that's a very powerful place for a writer to be, that it's flexible. Advice from other writers, that's really fun to like, what is like the motivation, right? Fellow collaborations, that while sometimes writing is done solo, like how is it a collaborative and community effort too? And then also like, how are fellow writers and authors and creators, like what is their journey? Like it didn't just like happen overnight. So like knowing that like it's not going to happen overnight, but what's the journey so that you can find companionship and motivation in that? And last but not least, but like how can writers write in community? And thinking about how students can support one another, and what the possibilities with that, and to grow alongside it, grow and nurture each other's heart alongside each other. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so here's an example of marrying the talking about books and free writing. And I promise it does not take a lot of time in the classroom. I kind of block out 10, 15 minutes in the classroom, usually on the longer side when it's after lunch. And if you know, you know. So here's an example is like, let's say I'm going to talk about Meg Medina. I'm going to introduce Meg Medina, Mercy Suarez, right? And there's several Mercy Suarez. And Meg Medina, if you ever watch this, thank you for writing Mercy Suarez. Love. And so when Meg Medina was a national ambassador for young people's literature, her platform was Cuéntame. Like, let's talk books. So cuéntame. And this is from the interview where she's saying is a phrase you use when you're sitting down with a friend and you haven't seen them in a while and you say, bueno, cuéntame. So tell me what's happening. If you're translating it directly, it would say like story me. And she says, like, I love that idea because what I'm asking is story me up. Tell me the books you love, and I'm going to tell you some of the books that I love. And let's talk about lives, family stories, and all of it. And I love how she's like, how stories start with oral storytelling. And Meg Medina invites us in to just tell that story. So just to like go back again, so introduce like her series, and I'd go on to like her website, and Meg Medina has a lot of like books from her, a lot of videos from her time as a national ambassador for young people's literature, and maybe show like a clip. And then it's like we'll have an invitation for free writing. And so like following this lines of like to tell stories, I love to get movement into the classroom at any time. So for this, I will have, we will either do inside outside circles, or we would do table talk, or maybe I will have them move and give them 10 seconds to find a partner or a trio, whatever it is. And of course, we have the routines for that already. And then we would go through this and just start telling stories. And I would have a student model, I would model, and then we would just tell the stories. So like one example would be like a family or friendship story. And I always tell them the story when my best friend and I don't even know how this happened. Like we were going to Denny's. I don't even know how we had the money to like go actually buy something. And then on the way back, we were walking back to my parents' house and she slipped on a banana peel. And when I tell the kids that, they're like, wait, what? Somebody actually really did that? I'm like, yeah, somebody actually really did that. And I saw it happen. And of course the kids are cracking up. Or I'll tell them something I learned, because being vulnerable and showing how like, even as an adult, we're learning, and what learning was like as a kid is important. One thing is anything from middle school, especially as kids are processing. I'm not going to tell you my middle school story, but it is quite interesting. And when I did tell them, the kids were like, what? So you can kind of get the point here. It's going to be loud. It's going to be fun, but as we're introducing and talking books, we're also introducing, like showing a perspective from an author in the world, and we're building that interest of books. We're also building the relationship within our community, and really important, we're having fun. Next slide. Okay, so here's another example from with Raul III, the Vamos series. If you don't know the Vamos series, please go out and order that. I wish the Vamos series existed when I was a kid. Now I get to read it to my 2 children, and we just have a great time with it. And going back to Dr. Bishop's work, it's a mirror for me. So thank you, Raul, for that. With this, I just want to pause again, is how many of your students are consuming and love graphic novels? Like if you were to just write a number down, think about that. Now for me, I don't know, I think I had 28 kids last year. The number would have been 28. Again, another thing, can't keep the books on the shelf, have to reorder. My library this year needs a lot of love. Very good. It's all good. We'll figure it out. And thinking about how kids love graphic novels and comics, like how do we tap into that interest both as reading and as writers? And so when I think about Raul's work, again, I would introduce the series and then also think about, I would show like a video or an interview. And I love how he talks so much about his journey always wanting to be this artist, and also how he would draw with big ballpoint pens and found motivation at the 7-Eleven with comic books. And so that journey, then kids see that journey that he's like been on and how it's changed over time is really important as a reader and as a writer, because we're always changing. So I got this perspective from Raul from Pencil Pushers podcast. And he said, when he was like, somebody asked him to like start a series, and this was his response, is fortunately, the very first thing I wrote down on my sheet of paper was vamos, let's go. After I wrote that, I realized I have a lot of titles with just those 3 words as my header. So I remember writing the list: vamos, let's go read; vamos, let's go to the marca; vamos, let's go to the beach; vamos, this and the other. I always wanted to create my own comic book, cartoon universe, and vamos is that world. It is my own Marvel and DC comic. So there you go. And I know you have kids that are creating graphic novels and comics in your classroom. I just know that. So after we've done some talking about books, and we shift into free writing, thinking about how kids love to create series, and just kind of like giving them the invitation in of like, make up a title, write down other titles for the series, and draw, write, narrate the story. And kids have so much fun with this. And every year I have students that spend weeks on a series, weeks and weeks and weeks. And that's a beautiful thing, because it's an entry point for writers. And the next slide, please. And another author to think about talking books with and writing is Claribel A. Ortega. Thank you for your series. Thank you for Frizzy. Thank you for everything. Can't keep the books on the shelf either. So after talking up one of Claribel's books, she has an amazing website, and I love all the Instagram posts too, and kids just like love it too. So like whatever's gonna work, just like you'll find something. And in her interview with geeksout.org, she said, when she was asked, like, what advice would you give other aspiring writers? And she says, and this is where that reading and writing comes together, is read a lot. Don't try to be perfect. Thank you for saying that. And write what makes your heart feel like it's about to explode. So again, it connects to reading and writing. It brings them together, and it really says the writer who reads and the reader who writes. And then also pushes back against this idea of perfectionism. And we know in our classrooms, and I don't want to be assuming anything, but every year I'm always getting students that are like, is this good enough? Is this okay? And I love this advice where she's really calling us in to push back against that idea of perfectionism. And then also calls us in and calls the community in to write from the heart. Now, if we have pre-prescribed curriculums where that's not necessarily happening, Claribel is saying, write from your heart. And in these moments, giving students the space to actually write from their heart. And of course, we have to keep in mind when we think of the process behind this, what's actually happening at that moment, at that day, and in the world. And we have to be sensitive to what might be happening in our young students' lives. So it's an invitation in to think about what your heart is feeling at the moment and just write. And that looks different for everyone. Sometimes it's a word. I know sometimes I only write a word down. Um, and then after you've given your students some time to write, I love asking this question is, how did you show up in your writing today? And that's going to the heart, is like, how are you showing up? And again, going back to pre-prescribed, like, here's the answer, like, here's the question, here's the answer. Um, we don't always have the space in that type of writing to show up of who we are in our social and personal identities. And so really asking kids to be meta about how did you show up in your writing today? I personally think is a powerful question to ask and reflective question when we're doing our own writing as teachers, but as well as throughout the year of our young writers. Next slide. Okay, so now when we talk about collaborations, so I'm going to pause again and I'm going to ask this question of how much of the writing in your classroom is collaborative? Now, David Bowles and Erica Missa, I brought the work of Two Border Towns out because it is a collaboration between an author and an illustrator. And it's celebrating the beauty and the culture and the power of community along the border. And I think it's important for all of us and within our classroom communities and learning alongside our students is learning about different ways people collaborate helps us grow, reflect and grow more in our own collaborations. And that helps strengthen the community. And here, David and Erica really go through that. And in the Publishers Weekly interview, they're interviewed, and David says that my hope is that you and I, with this book, will transmit even a fraction of the way we feel about transnational lifestyle to the larger readership. So David is communicating like that connected purpose. And then Erica goes on and says, indeed, hopefully little by little, we can start to reclaim the narrative. And by telling our own stories, maybe start defining our own identity on our own terms more and more. Although granted, I expect it will never stop being complex nor multi-layered. It is the border after all. So here, Erica is like talking about the action and also really talking about creating a counter narrative to a narrative that may not be true out there. And that's really a call in for writers when they're thinking about their work, like what is the counter narrative to the story that's always been told and centered. And also with this collaboration, you see the power of making something possible in community. So what does this look like for young writers after talking up the books? Again, both have so many books and so many things that have been illustrated for you to be able to feature to whatever the interests and needs of your classroom are. Again, have kids partner up and I have the kids list like what they have in common and then write something together. And the connection is really powerful. I have to admit that my AP walked in once when I was doing this process, and it was really, really loud in the classroom. So I'm really, whatever. And there was a group of kids that started to. They had this like favorite cartoon. I don't even remember what it was in common. So they decided to rewrite it, and it was beautiful to see how the 4 students each took a different role. So like. One was actually drawing, one was narrating, one was commentating, and one was the accountability person in the group. So it was like really beautiful to see that collaboration come together. And that group of students worked for about 3 weeks on that piece, and it was just pure fun. And we need fun, we need joy in our classrooms. And next slide. Just like we did before with reading, thinking about that reflection, right? Um, and what does that look like for us as teachers is how can more space be given to free writing? What is one thing you could commit to that is manageable? Just like one thing. And then for your students, just like with reading, ask like, how have you grown as a writer? And what would you like to do more as a writer? Next slide. And so as we start to conclude, thinking about putting it all together again, and some things I just like want to point out. So when we're talking books and like thinking about free writing through highlighting process, advice, collaborations, how are we co-creating with students? If like when you build a routine, it's like how do kids take it over? How do students take it over? How are students the decision makers? How are students centered as authors and creators? And that really increases more energy around both reading and writing in the classroom. And across the year, sometimes like students will volunteer to share and like talk to the class around the book and like about the author's work, or sometimes kids will volunteer about their own writing and their own what they would like to feature to the community. But either which way, kids are taking ownership over it, and it's like I have to step back because this is really about the students. But creating that, co-creating is really important for that. And then that goes into cultivating space. And I understand that everybody's situation is different. I know that I'm privileged in terms of having double blocks in my ELA classroom. So I do have a little bit more time. But what I want us to think about is how do we carve out 10 minutes? How do we carve out 15 if we can, whether that be once every 2 weeks, once a week, or a couple of times a week? I think time can be a challenge, but time shouldn't be a wall without a door. So we have to kind of think about what do we need to do to make sure that we can grab some of that time. And last but not least is we thinking about celebrating the community, celebrating your young readers and writers, and their relationship with reading and writing and how it's changing and how it's layered. There's so much happening in the world. And the more we can celebrate how readers and writers are discovering things along the way, the more that we can celebrate that writers are finally releasing that story that's living inside, the more that we can celebrate the strengths of all the students in the classroom, the more we can celebrate just wondering about things in life, and the more we can celebrate the collectivism around community is so important to keep the energy going, and really centering the students as we nurture the reader and the writer. So on that note, if we can go to the next slide. A big thank you. I think I talked a little fast, sorry. But a big thank you to everyone who has joined us for today at the Latinx Kidlit Book Festival. I am available for questions via Instagram, or if you want to like think through something, just reach out, message me. In the meantime, I hope that one thing from today's session will reach your classrooms and reach the amazing students that you have in your classroom. And as the year gets started or continues, I hope that all of the educators and teachers find rest and take care of their hearts. And again, thank you for doing the work that really truly supports students and families. And it's been a pleasure to be with you today. But thank you.